let's figure out how to use Inventor. Alright, when you load up, you will have this screen most likely pop up. That's your home screen, my home screen, whatever. I disable it because I don't use it. You can leave it up by all means. All it does is basically kind of give you your recently used things, quick commands to open up a part, an assembly, a drawing, or a presentation file. Um, the long and the short of it is Inventor is made up of four different file types. You have your part type, part file, an IPT. Um, that is your individual components, a part that you make. An assembly file, which is made up of multiple parts. See the little blocks here? It's a .asm file, an assembly file where you combine different parts together. A drawing file, which is where you would detail, um, put dimensions on your print if you were doing a layout or something that you wanted to then eventually print out. Um, if you were building like a shed or so, whatever, something, or for me, sending it to a machine shop to get manufactured. Sometimes it's helpful just as giving like a general layout, um, sticking things into a drawing gives you the opportunity to dimension things a little bit easier than in the actual part file. We can go into that later. And a presentation file is basically a very rudimentary version of how things would go together. Very simple animations. Anywho, what we want to go to is make a part. That'll be the meat and potatoes of everything. So you click on that and it'll open up a blank screen. Now, if yours does not look like this, it's most likely because I have changed it on my end. Actually, that's exactly why. So, if we go up to File, the top left, Options, we can go to Colors. I have mine on high contrast with a background of a single color. It makes it look, for me, I'm more comfortable with this. It's more like AutoCAD. It's a black background, white lines, and stuff just, I'm just used to it like this. Um, so if I'm referring to certain colors in my scheme that don't match yours, it is most likely because of this. Actually, it's exactly because of this. So if you are lost or something like that based on what I'm saying, maybe go into the high contrast mode so your colors match mine. But by all means, feel free to jump around and use whatever one you um, like. It doesn't really matter, whatever you get used to. Now that we're in this application options, we're going to actually, I'm going to turn off, I'm going to go to the general tab and turn off that home screen because I don't want it. And the next thing we're going to do is go to File, then this Configure Default Templates here. This is where you can change it from inches to millimeters. Okay. I am going to stick in millimeters because that's what I'm used to. Inventor is a program where you can type in, even though if you're in a metric file, you can type in inches or feet or miles, really, I guess, into the dimensions as you draw it, and it'll convert it to that. It's a parametric um, drawing system, so the units are interchangeable. It knows the difference between the units, so you could say make a line that's 5 inches and then extrude it up, which is make it solid, 4 millimeters. Like you can interchange them there; they mesh well together. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to keep mine on millimeters and then go into this. So this is already in millimeters. So when you're in here, you're going to have a blank, um, just a blank screen. The left side is your browser tree. This is where all of your information, your origins, your axes are all kept. All your sketches and your features will all be listed here. Top of the screen is all of your commands that you're going to be using for drawing things. Inventor typically will keep everything in a relatively straightforward manner. Things that are more important or commonly used are on the left, and as you go across, they become least common, less used. Um, but not necessarily less important. Um, yeah, so let's just make a sketch. We're gonna make one of these, a little deck card holder. Gives me something to strive towards. So we're just basically gonna make a box with some cutouts in it, and it looks like a shell with some nice radiuses in the corners, so it's not sharp. All right. So first thing what you want to do is you want to make a sketch. These are two different buttons here. One of them's a pull down to do 2D sketch, 3D sketch. Don't worry about a 3D sketch. That's like drawing a line literally in 3D space. I have not really found a use for it. So you can just click on this button up here, start 2D sketch. As soon as you do that, it brings up all your planes. XY plane is the most common plane. You click on that, it'll automatically make a sketch. Your top menu will change, and it'll automatically orient it to that plane. Dead center is your origin, center point. If you hover over top of any of these, it'll kind of highlight what those are. We are on the XY plane, so naturally, if you hover over top of the XZ plane and the YZ plane, they will be, we're basically looking at the sides of them. And then the axes, XY axes are there. Those will come important later. Basically, we are going to be using these as our center points and drawing everything around them. Okay, so all of the stuff up here is everything that you would need in order to sketch your geometry that you want. Parts are made up of sketches that then get turned into features that then are your part. And you just build up multiple features comprised of sketches to make your part. These are the most common sketch geometry that's here. They have little pull downs to give you more options for the less common things. Line, you really only need line. You can use a spline if you need to do more complex shapes, but most of the time it's just going to be a line. Circle, ellipse, arc, different points of arc. Rectangle is probably the one, the pull down in it is the most useful because you can get polygons. So if you need a hexagon or an octagon or something like that, that's where you'd pull it from. But rectangle is the most common thing. If text, and then all of your other stuff, and we'll get into that. So if we just pick one, we can just select it and start moving things around. And it will be, everything's really color based. So right now in this color scheme, blue means undefined or unconstrained geometry. I can move it around, do whatever. Nothing is defining that it cannot move. So I can move it around to whatever I want. You can, snap it to different things. You can give it dimensions if you want. I'm just going to highlight it and delete it, and I'm going to make a box. So I select rectangle, make a box. You can see on the bottom and the right hand side, it gives you rough dimensions of what you're drawing. It's always best to kind of keep it roughly the size that you want to do. Let's say we're going to do a, actually, how big's a card? Do I have a, I don't really have a ruler around here, so we are just going to make it look roughly that shape. We're going to make a 45 millimeter by 100 millimeter box. So this doesn't really matter how big you do it, just roughly that general size is fine. You don't even have to go general. You can change all this stuff later. You can hit escape and it'll unselect the current command that you have. And because this is blue, you can move it all around. So I want to make it a size. So I click on dimension up here, or you can hit D. You can see up here it says general dimension, and then beside it has the keyboard shortcut. If you hover over any of these commands, it'll actually give you a little pull down of an example of what it actually does. So this will show you, hey, it makes a rectangle, just like it says. Okay, so dimension. Click on dimension, it's highlighted. We can click on a line, click on the dimension there. It pops up with the dimension. We can type in 50. We're going to make this 50 by 100 now that I say that. Okay, so I want to dimension the height, 100, boom. That is not a ratio, aspect ratio of a card, so let's make this look more like a deck of cards, 75 by 100, okay. So we've dimensioned the width and the height. That's all we need, right? But why is it still blue? Because we haven't anchored it in 2D space yet, right? This here is 0, 0. If we go to the right in X, or horizontally, it goes positive in the X direction value, and if we go up, it goes positive in the Y value, and then, you know, this is negative in the Y value, still positive in the X, negative in the X and the Y, and negative in the X, but positive in the Y, blah, blah, blah. Cartesian plane crap. Anyway, I always like to draw everything centered around the origin, or the center point. So the best way to do this is you can project geometry. So projecting geometry just basically makes a line. So I click on project geometry and I select the X, Y, and Z axis. I know the Z axis is technically coming directly at us in this, but force a habit, I just select them all at the same time. So what that does is it gives us these three lines that we can then either take this center point, click and drag it up to there. I like to make everything in and around the origin. I like to center everything nice and symmetrical. So you can do this a couple different ways. You can dimension this. I want it to go from here to here, and I want it to be half of the width. So I know the width is 75. Half of 75 is what? 37 and a half. So you can type that in, and now it's perfectly in the center. And then you can go the opposite way. You go here to here, and I want that to be half of the height, which is 50. And there we go. Now, you've noticed all of these have changed color. They're purple, which means this sketch is fully constrained. I cannot move this around. You're probably wondering, okay, why the fuck do I care about that? When you start making other sketches on top of sketches and sketches on sides of parts and all that other stuff, it's really important to make your sketches fully constrained, because then when you go and change dimensions later on, those other sketches that you've built off of sides of parts and all that will move with it and accommodate for that. If you don't, things can get a little bit messy, and it doesn't allow you the flexibility of altering your parts willy-nilly, right? And we can get more into that later. So we could just do it this way with dimensioning a line going over and hitting that that number, you know, doing the math in our head. But what if I change this to say, oh, you know what? I actually measured a card and it's 85 millimeters wide. Oh, you know what? Now it's not in the center. Okay, well that's not good. So let's just double click on this to change this dimension. And well, let's just say, well, I want to make it this dimension, and I want it half of it. So now it is linked to this dimension in a formula base. So it's d0, dimension 0, divided by 2. UL is unitless measurement, or unitless number. So if I change this to 100, it's going to automatically make it 50. Change that to 75, 37 and a half. Okay. So you can do the same with this. Double click on it, click on a dimension, divide by 2. If I wanted it to be a third, be centered that way, but you can, you can do that. It's all based on, you can make it all math, whatever. The other way you can do this is with constraints. These are all the constraints here. Constraints are like rules, okay? It's a like a hard rule. What do you want to do? I want to make this touching that. I want to make this parallel to that. I want to make this line horizontal. I want to make it vertical. I want to make it tangent to something. I want to make it symmetrical around something. I use constraints a lot because it reduces the amount of dimensions I use. Dimensions are the important things for me. The constraints are the background information of how I lay it out on the piece of paper or in the sketch. Not as important. It can get a little bit more confusing if you're not as familiar with it. So constraints can make you frustrated at times because you'll go to change a dimension and you're like, why isn't this moving? Well, it's most likely because of a constraint. I will not get it. I won't get into them as much here, but you just should be aware of them because when you are drawing things, Inventor will automatically make certain constraints for you. It likes to make things horizontal, vertical, perpendicular, and parallel to things. And you'll see these icons showing up. So if I click on a line, these icons automatically show up. So if I hover over them, this is a parallel constraint. So this is telling me that this line is parallel to that bottom line down there that's turning red. This is a horizontal constraint. It's just saying that this line is horizontal, and this is a perpendicular constraint. So it's saying that that line is perpendicular to the other red line. If I wanted to, for some reason, get rid of it, I can just click on the constraint, hit delete, and now all of a sudden I should be able to move this. Yeah, see, I can really mess it up because that it's no longer like a rectangle. It's like a parallelogram or polygon or something else, rhombus, something. Okay, so I want to take that, put that back to a rectangle. I'm going to click on perpendicular, click on that, boom. I want to make these things symmetrical around the center point, so I'm going to click on symmetrical. Down on the bottom corner, it tells you select first element, which is the line. You go line, line, center line, boom, automatically makes it symmetrical, puts the constraints there. I know I'm going a little bit into the weeds with the constraints right now, but you can always go back, scrub back in the video to see this again. Okay, so now I've got the rectangle drawn in the same, it's purple now. It is basically in the same fashion as what we drew before, but now I have 2 less dimensions on it. The things that matter, 75 and 100. If I change everything, it keeps everything all around the center, right? Just how I like it. Okay, so we have this sketch here. So I'm done with this sketch now. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to make the outside box. I hit this big green thing, finish sketch. Kind of zooms in. Oh yeah, your mouse button, the wheel mouse, if you zoom in and out, scroll it, zooms in and out. Hold the mouse button down, you can pan. So what we want to do is extrude this out to make it a shape. So if you hover over extrude, what does it say? It says creates a feature or body by adding depth to a profile. It needs to have a closed geometry in order to make it. So say we didn't actually draw this other line, these would just be 3 lines and not an actual closed box. It wouldn't be able to extrude. So I'm going to click on extrude, and it automatically finds that closed geometry there, and it asks us what we want to do. This little thing here is a condensed version of the bigger box over here. I don't really use this little quick menu thing because I like to have more options up here. So it asks us how big do you want the box to make, or how big do you want to make the box. Let's say we want to make it 35 millimeters tall. It extrudes it up. We can tell it which way it wants to go, or we can make it symmetrical around the center. In this case, I just wanted to go with the one side because I'll treat that back edge as like the table or something like that. You just hit OK, and now we have a box. So we can move things around by this box up at the top corner. We can click on edges here. We can click and drag it, and it'll rotate things here. Or we can use this little free orbit button over here to rotate things around. I personally like to use the F4 button because as you press it, it toggles it. You press and hold. So you can just toggle it and move things around. Double click, it centers things. So earlier I talked about that we were going to change the default visual style so that we could see the edges. Can't really see the edges on this one very well. I changed it in the default, but I hadn't actually changed it in my part yet. So if you ever want to change how the part looks, so you want wireframe or shaded or whatever, you just go up to the View tab and you go to Visual Styles, and then it has all of the options here. These bottom ones, don't worry about them, they're just hokey, whatever. Shaded with edges is the one I like the best. However, on my computer, it doesn't like to show the edges for some reason. I don't know why. It still does the edges in white. So let's go to File, Options, Colors, Display, Display edges. Let's see, Apply. Does that show anything? That does not show anything. Okay, go to Application Options, Apply. Nothing. All right. Settings. One color. I want the colors to be black. Let's make it black. Force it black. Okay, it forced it black. There we go. We can see it. You may not need to go through this if your video card plays nice with Inventor. Mine apparently doesn't. Me forcing it black, if I change the color of this object to black, it'll still keep those lines as black, and then you can't see things. If it works fine on your computer and you don't have to do this, it automatically makes them black or dark gray or something. When you do change your color of the object to something else, it'll give you a high contrast edge so that you can see all of this stuff properly. So this point may be mute, so do not worry about that. Okay, so we have this box. Let's look back at our thing. What do we need to do? So we need to make this inner profile for the cards to go in. Okay, so what do I want to do? I need to draw geometry. So I want to make a sketch. So in the 3D model tab, sketch, select this plane because I want it to go down to the top, and I can just make a rectangle here, like I'm cutting into it. Just hit escape. Now what do I want to do? I want to make the edges 2 millimeters thick. So you can select dimension, select the edge of the box. It'll automatically let you select it. And I want to select my geometry, and I want to say 2 millimeters. Okay. So I could go around and say I want this edge to be 2 millimeters as well. This edge to be 2 millimeters as well. That's giving me a dimension. If things don't automatically select for you right away, you can just try it again. It depends on where how you move your mouse after you select the dimensions. So if I hit dimension again, I'm doing keyboard shortcuts. I gotta stop that. Sorry. If I select dimension and I click on that, if I automatically just drag down, it's going to give me a width. All right. If I go from here and I, even though it's showing dimension there, I haven't dragged all the way down yet, and I kind of hover here, it gives me a spot to click, and then I can do the width there. So that's something just to keep an eye out for. If you're getting frustrated with how it's dimensioning, just slow it down or try clicking in a different order of operations to try to get what you want. You can also click here and here, and that'll give you an angle. It's somewhat intuitive for that kind of thing, line to line. with 2 millimeters. Now that we've done that, what do I have? I have 4 different dimensions here. All of them have different values. If you wanted to make them all different numbers, that's fine. But say you wanted to have them all linked, so you only had to change one value. You can do the exact same thing as what I showed you before with it all formula based. So say I wanted them all to be this number here, 3 millimeters. When I'm drawing it, you can either do before or after, or during. Click on it, and I want this one to be this dimension. And instead of doing like a formula, like that dimension divided by whatever, I'm just saying, no, I want it to be the same as that dimension. So that dimension, I want it to be that dimension. So it's saying, make that D6, dimension number 6. Now, if you're doing it while you're drawing it, click on a dimension, and instead of just typing in the number, you can just click on that dimension at any time. So now, if I go to that base dimension and I say, I want actually a 5 millimeter wall, everything else changes, which makes it nice, hunky-dory. So I want 2 millimeter walls. Boom. Okay, I'm done with this sketch. This is what I want. I hit finish. So now I have a box on top of a box, or a 2D box on top of a 3D box, and I want to cut that geometry out of there. So you go to extrude, and I select the middle part because I want to take that out. Right now it's going to add it to there. I don't want to do that. I want to do the inverse of that. I want to cut it away. So these 3 boxes here in the middle of this extrude pane is, the first one is make a solid. Second one is basically cut or take away from a solid, and the other one is the combined the intersection point of those 2 solids. Very, very, very rarely is ever intersect. So most of the time is you want to either make a part or cut a part. So we want to cut. It automatically forces it down. This little pull down, you can kind of click and drag if you don't really know exactly how deep you want to make it or something like that. You can kind of drag it to there. We made this 35 millimeters deep, so we want to go, I want to keep a consistent distance around everything. So I can go type in 32, or I can go 35 minus 3. And now I know that that bottom is going to be the same as these widths here, because I made those 3. Okay, so that's starting to look a little bit closer to this guy here. So what do we need to do now? Let's add these scoops out from here. Okay, so to add those scoops, what do I want to do? I gotta cut a circle away from it. So I can select this edge and hit sketch, or if you've noticed, it'll automatically kind of bring up a couple of options for you to do. One of them is the same sketch symbol, so you can do create sketch and it'll automatically make it on there. So sketch there. I'll do a circle. I want the circle to be starting from there. I started it on this line here, so it automatically kind of connected it there. I want it to be in the center of the whole part. So how did we make something in the center of the part before? Because we drew everything around the origins, if I project these axes, hey, there's our center line. That's the exact center of our box, and I know it's the center of our box because that's how we drew this view before. Okay. So I can either just click and drag this over to this line and it'll automatically snap it to that line, or I can tell it a constraint, coincident constraint, which is just basically saying I want to make this point touching that point. Okay, next thing would be a dimension. I can give it a dimension of a circle of 40 millimeters, or you can go, I want it to be from here, I want it to be 15 millimeters down, or you can go vice versa. You can go, I want to make sure I have 25 millimeters from the bottom. Okay, You can dimension it however you like. Just kind of play around with it. Let's say 35 millimeters. Okay, that looks about good. That'll give you a nice little thumb hole to go. What do I want to do? I want to cut through this. So I am done with this sketch. Everything's purple. Hunky dory. Hit finish sketch. Go to extrude. Select cut. It automatically selected my geometry because I know how much I wanted to go. And it's going, it's only going 32 millimeters in, which is not far enough. I want it to go all the way across. So I could either click and drag this and go all the way across like that. Or, instead of telling it I wanted to go at a specific distance, I could say, hey, I want you to go through everything. And it'll go through everything. So no matter what the distance is, if I go back and change this dimension to 300 meters, that cut hole would go all the way through it all. Doesn't matter. To infinity and beyond. Fucking Buzz Lightyear. Alright. So we got that. Let's make another sketch on this side to do the thumb hole in the bottom side. Now, it is giving me a center point here because it knows where the origins are here. So I could just use those if I wanted. I'm going to give it a little bit of a different shape here. So I'm just going to draw some funky lines. Okay. So I want this edge to be touching this edge here. And I want this to be, say, 20 millimeters wide. I want it to go down 25 millimeters. I want this to be centered around the center point, so I select point to point, and I can't select an edge or a line, so let me project the middle points. I'm just kind of messing around just so you can kind of see what's going on here. Let's make this symmetrical. The thing with symmetrical things is you always have to, you can pick a point, a line, but you always have to have a center line for everything. Okay. I want this center point to be touching the center line. And then I want this to be a 100-degree angle. This to be a 70. That doesn't look right. 120. And this to be a, let's make that a 90. You know, it's a stupid looking shape, but whatever. Alright, so now I'm done with that. I will extrude it through, and I want to make it a cut. Now, this one's showing me I have two different sides. Now, why do I have two different sides? Oh, that's right, because I projected the geometry of the axes through, which gave me a hard line. You can use them for geometry or whatever. Just be aware that they can affect your parts. If you click and drag it through, it automatically changes it to a cut. Or you can just select it here and it automatically changes the directions. When in doubt, just kind of hover over top of anything and it'll tell you what it is. So that's going to cut it all the way through. I'm going to go to all. Say you wanted to go to a specific thing and you had other geometry over here that you didn't want it to cut through, you could tell it to cut to, and you told it I wanted to cut to this surface, and it'll cut to that surface without affecting any geometry that was behind it, if there was that. Okay, so now we have that. What else do we need? Oh, hey, I made this wrong. I did not make the geometry in the bottom. Alright. You know what? Let's back this up. Okay, so on the side here, now that we see we've made multiple parts, or multiple features inside of this part, and you hover over top of them, it kind of highlights what you did. Okay, so this This extrusion 1 was the main box. This extrusion 2 was the cut inside of the box. Extrusion 3 was the holes on the side. Extrusion 4 was this one. I don't like that one. So I'm going to right click and delete, or you can bring this end of part back up behind it. It's kind of like a little history button, just to kind of see what you did. Okay, so I know I want to back it up to that section because I fucked up on this one, and I don't like that. So I'm going to delete that feature, and I'm going to redraw this other one. So I'm going to do a sketch. I'm going to click on this side again. No, I don't want to click on that side. I selected the wrong thing. So I'm going to delete that sketch, and I'm going to sketch on the bottom, because I want to make the hole going through this way. Okay, so that's the same, circle. So click and draw a circle. I want it to touch this edge here, so I can project geometry to give me an edge. Now it's green. You see that green line showing up there? And I can either click and drag that up to it so it touches it. That center point is purple. You know it's constrained. I can dimension it. Sorry, used the keyboard shortcut. I can dimension it. And I want to make it 45. And I am done with the sketch, so I'm going to cut it all the way through. Cut. Well, that's weird. Okay, it's cutting one way, cut the other way, but not both ways. There's a way you can get around that, and it's by telling it to go symmetrical. So now it goes through both ways. Okay, this is where the all cut feature comes in real handy, because now if I say go that way, it'll go all the way to infinity up, all the way to infinity below, and it cuts it nice like that. All right, that's getting a little bit closer to what we want. Let's look. So it had nice radiused edges there. So looks like I made that a little bit too big. So let's go back and change that dimension. So the little pull down on the extrusion, I wanted this the sketch. I want to edit the sketch again. So you can either double click on the sketch, or you can right click, edit sketch. It goes back into the sketch, automatically orients to it. Let's make it 25. Let's make it 30. Okay, done with that. Oh, it automatically changed everything there. Okay, that looks nice. So I don't think, just based on the geometry that I made, I'm going to be able to make that radius go from here and touching all the way down to the bottom, which is fine. But I'll still make that edge nice and radiused. So I could go into here, make a sketch, draw like an arc, touching here to here, and then making it all nice and touching, and make it dimensioned properly so it's touching this edge and radius and all that other stuff. Or I can make a feature itself, a fillet. So if I select this, it says, what do you want to do? Select an edge to fillet. So I can select this little edge here, and it'll make a radius already. So then I can click and drag this to what I want, or if I know what I want it to be, I wanted it to be 15, I can make it there. Now the beautiful thing about the radiuses is you can make multiple radiuses at once. You could select, a bunch of them, because the radiuses are so big, it's messing it up. So I don't want that many. So if you ever need to unselect something, you can just do the select edge, hold down Control, and it allows you to unselect the things you did. Okay, I like those radiuses there. Gonna hit OK, and there we go. So now if we look over here, we see we have an extrusion here, and then we have a fillet here, which is associated with that edge. But I wanted it to be on this other side too, because I like things being symmetrical, and that's not symmetrical. So I want to make a mirror. I want to mirror this over to the other side. So there's a feature for that called pattern. In the pattern selection, mirror, you can also make a rectangular pattern, a circular pattern, sketch driven. Don't think I've ever used that. Nope, don't need to use that. Don't worry about that. Mirror. So what mirror does is it allows you to mirror certain features along around a plane, or with a plane as a center line. So I select a mirror, it automatically selects things here. It says select a feature to pattern down at the bottom left. Whenever, if you don't know what you need to be doing next, just look at the bottom left. It'll tell you. So I want to select a feature. So you can either select it on the model, or you can select it on the side tree here. Hover. It'll tell you. It'll highlight things. You don't have to click right away. You don't need to commit. You don't need to go down that road, right? You can either select things on the model or the tree. The tree gets you a little bit more defined of what you want. What do we want to do? We want to select that cutout. We want to mirror it around what plane? Because we drew everything on the center line and everything's symmetrical, we can select the center plane. I'm just hovering over top of that to get the one I want. And hey, it moved it over there. Hit OK. Boom. There you are. But I forgot to add the feature there. So let's go back or the fillet into that feature. So let's go back to the mirror, right click on it, do edit feature, click on the feature pane again because I forgot to add it, and I just add it in there, hit OK, and boom, it's back in there. There we go. That looks pretty close to what we wanted. Now in this, there looks like there's some nice radius edges all around. We already know how to use the fillet command. We could give it some nice small little 0.5 millimeter radius edges for, just making nice soft edges so you don't hurt your fingers when you're doing this. If you're 3D printing this, then yeah, you want to add little things like this because it'll actually print it out. It does add to the complexity of the print. If you're just drawing this to get geometry for laying things out, you don't need to put the radius edges in there unless it's important. But now that gives nice soft edges in there. And again, if you wanted to go in here and add more fillets to it in that same feature, you can either right click edit feature or double click and click here, and you can keep on adding them. Alright, that probably does it for now. That's the gist of everything there. There's the bare bones fundamentals. Because of all the crap that I did at the beginning, if you go into any of your earlier sketches, and if you drew everything right, you could go in and drastically start changing things. And everything, because this is a very simple shape and everything is symmetrical, it's all self-adjusting, right? Everything's all parametric. Oh, hey, I didn't make that 3 millimeters. Made that 2 millimeters. Oh, see, now it's a little bit thicker. Now, say on that inside edge, because this is the part that's actually like holding the cards. We know how wide the cards are. We don't actually want to define this whole thing by the widths. We want to define it by the card itself. So if we just hit, we could delete all of these dimensions and say, I know how wide a card is now. I actually went and measured it. It is 88 millimeters by 135 millimeters. That's the exact measurements, and I want to give a 1 millimeter clearance. Now that I've changed this not being symmetrical anymore, how do we make it symmetrical? Project some geometry, select your planes, and tell it to go symmetrical. Line, line, center line, escape, select again, line, line, center line. Everything's purple, hunky-dory. We can just hit finish. Because it was part of an earlier sketch, it automatically knew that that's what I was doing. And now that is perfectly dimensioned to that theoretical card that I don't know the size of. Alrighty.